Hello, so my name's Michael Conneely, and this video and its accompanying blog post are entitled "There are very difficult Venus love energies, July to November 2023. Now do see my sort of part 1 post, which is all about the meaning of Venus retrograde periods generally. So I won't repeat that material here because that material is meant as an offering to the future, a reference point for the future. So what we need to look at in this post about July to November 2023 are the extreme, wide-ranging troubles that Venus will be having at this time when indeed there's a Venus retrograde period. So here's an introductory summary of these Venus details and difficulties that it will be so useful for each of us to hear, to notice, and to heal if we sense them arriving in our consciousness, in our relationship. So first of all, I offer the detail of what's going on when Venus, the planet of love, is retrograde, 22nd of July to September the 3rd. Secondly, I offer most important information about when Venus is transiting through the Cancer-Leo Gandanta Zone, and I'll be explaining what is a Gandanta Zone. Thirdly, I'll be giving an indication of how Venus energies manifest differently when they're in the signs involved of this period: Cancer, Leo, Virgo and Libra. Fourthly, Lilith is conjunct Venus. What does that mean? Fifthly, Pluto is square the nodal axis at this time. What does that mean? Sixthly, Ketu is transiting Libra at this time, the sign that Venus rules. What energy does that bring? Chiron is trine Venus. At one point in the period, Venus transits conjunct the Sun and is combust. Venus and Mars are actually together in the Cancer Leo Gandanta at times. Saturn is transiting opposite Mars in the heaven at times, in fact widely in this period, and Saturn is transiting opposition Venus at times. What does that mean? So let's go into the detail. Well, first of all, Venus is retrograde. Venus is retrograde 23rd of July, and the retrograde ends the 3rd of September. And Venus has already gone through a very big challenge at the beginning of his retrograde, because Venus has been through the Cancer-Leo Gandanta that stretches from 27 Cancer to 3 Leo. I'll be telling you what a Gandanta zone is in more detail, but briefly they are the 3 transition points from water to fire, so wonderfully recognised by Vedic astrology and so totally valid. And they are Pisces to Aries, Cancer to Leo and Scorpio to Sagittarius. And they're fiercest in their effects of immateriality and stormy issues at the 0 point of the sign change, but they extend like 3 degrees either side, where the effects get less and less the further they are from the 0 point. So this 44-day Venus retrograde phase is a call for each of us to be especially careful, especially those of us for whom Venus is a ruling planet, such as people with a Libra or Taurus emphasis in their charts, people who are in Venus Dasha, that's Venus predictive period in Vedic astrology. And it's important to note the house in your birth chart, or the houses in your birth chart, that Venus occupies or rules, and the areas of your life determined by those houses will be most strongly affected. At times, Venus will have stationary motion in the heavens. So as a special detail, make a note of and be very careful of the Venus stationary periods. So from July the 20th to the 24th, we have a stationary retrograde Venus when Venus first turns retrograde, commences his retrogradation. And from September the 1st to the 5th, we have a stationary direct Venus where Venus has been retrograding but turns direct again. Also be aware of, and make a note in your diary, the shadow periods. So basically there are two. It's when Venus is transiting within the zone, he'll shortly be retrograding back through. And secondly, it's when Venus has turned direct after a retrograde, but is yet to reach his pre-retrogradation position. They are also affected by the Venus retrograde energy. We need to know that. A super important thing is when Venus disappears from the heavens. And I covered this in the part 1 video where I recounted the ancient Mesopotamian wisdom of the descent of goddess of love Ishtar, also called Inanna, into the underworld. That this disappearance of Venus can be explained by. Really do see that. It's about going into the depths of our love issues, facing them, and arising healed and even more loving. So basically, Venus is evening star to begin with, but then Venus retrogrades and disappears into the underworld, like Ishtar or Inanna. But when Venus emerges from behind the sun, Venus is reborn as morning star, as light bringer. It's really good to do art or other creative expression at the time of these Venus underworld and Venus morning star times. It really can be so useful, so liberating, so empowering, so satisfying in a Venusian way. Now be aware that at the time of a Venus retrograde period, you might be finding yourself revisiting past or unresolved relationship issues, or events that have affected your issues in showing of love in this life. At the time of Venus retrograde period, work on problem issues to do with your expression of your self-worth, your self-valuing. Re-envision yourself at this time of Venus challenge. Make needed steps to be seen, heard and valued. Now, as a twist to the tale, note that on this occasion of Venus retrograde, Mercury is retrograde as well from the 23rd of August to the 15th of September. So between those dates, it means that both Mercury and Venus are retrograde at the same time, from the 23rd of August to the 3rd of September, both of them. And so be aware of the energies of a double retrograde. With a double retrograde, this might be seen as a time to wait, to tread lightly, to let the combined retrograde energy pass. Double retrogrades are always complicated. Venus does cease retrograde on the 3rd of September, but be aware that on the 4th of September, Jupiter turns retrograde on the 4th of September, with the Mercury retrograde continuing. So be aware that when Venus turns direct after a retrograde, things will shift and will move again. Watch out for that. Capitalize upon it. So the next point I wanted to explain is, what is the Gandanta? Now, in the period the 2nd of July to the 6th of October, Venus is going through one of the 3 Gandanta zones This is the Cancer to Leo Gandanta. It's a transition point from water sign to fire sign, and as I said, there are 3 of them. Venus energies will be turbulent and difficult to manage for each of us. And incidentally, there can be like terrible weather happening now, and it's certainly been the case here in Ireland. Just totally atypical storm weathers at the time of the peak tourist season. Such a shame for those who've booked holidays. By the way, the last retrograde of Venus in the Cancer Leo Gandanta was July to September 2007. Now, Gandanta zones are water sign to fire sign transition points, and they are zones of immateriality. They extend up to 3 degrees either side of the 0 point, but it's at the 0 point that the immateriality is strongest, and the strength of the Gandanta zone gets less and less the further it is away, in the 3 degrees either side of the 0 point. It is so important to know if you have a Gandanta planet in your birth chart. When I first found out, for example, that I have a Gandanta moon in my birth chart and read the meaning of it, it absolutely converted me to add Vedic astrology to my Western astrology, and I started teaching both 28 years ago. I've come across people with Gandanta Venus who have no idea about the nature of the person they're in love with. They're essential to know about. They're unique to Vedic astrology, and they can only be identified using the sidereal zodiac, which needs to be used for Vedic astrology. If you have a planet in your birth chart that's in one of the Gandanta zones, you so need to know about this fact and to know what it means. Get a reading from me. At the highest experience of Gandanta zones, they are the end of a water sign dissolving into the void. And across the void we can see the first flicker of the fire sign. But the void is what the Buddhists call nirvana and Hinduism calls the God realm. But it's so immaterial for this world. And planets are so very messed up if they fall in a Gandanta zone. So basically, when planets transit a Gandanta zone, we can experience great unsettlement and crisis. Gandanta zones are unstable energies. They unravel. They reveal. And most importantly, Gandanta zones, energy zones, are karmic knots. So it's so important to understand when a transiting planet is in a Gandanta zone. It's so important to understand the destiny becoming manifest or apparent and to respond to that call for healing. Venus is a guru, so be very aware that your Venus guru is compromised or made very immaterial or divine when Venus transits a Gandanta zone. Now, Mars and Venus were quite closely conjunct at the start of July, and both of them were in the Cancer Leo Gandanta zone. So that is an energy, and it's set a scene for Venus-Mars frictions. So in the accompanying blog, I do list the timetable for Venus's transits through the Gandanta zone. Forward, retrograde, and forward again. And basically, I don't want to give a lot of facts and figures, but you're talking around 7th July, 7th August, and end September, early October. But the actual dates are in the associated blog. Venus sign changes. Now, at this time, Venus moves from Vedic Cancer to Leo, then retrogrades back again into Cancer, then forward again into Leo, and then into Virgo, and then into Libra. There's a timetable in the associated blog, but you need to realise that Venus manifests so differently in each of those signs. We're essentially looking at Cancer, Leo and Virgo. It all cheers up when Venus gets into his own sign, Libra. So Venus in Cancer is very loving, but full of the sorrows of the world and changeable and with ailments, fluctuating. Cancer's ruled by the moon. Venus in Leo is very different. Leo is the sign of courage and energy. But Leo is an enemy sign for Venus, so there will be irritation. Venus in Leo energies are princess mentality. It's not so good for successfully relating. It does love luxury and pleasure, has strong affections, but can be conceited, complacent, self-absorbed, indulgent, where pleasures turn into arguments. And then, 3rd of November to 29th of November, Venus moves into Virgo, ruled by Mercury. Venus in Virgo, Venus is debilitated in Virgo. Venus cannot express love, nature, and all the other Venus matters well in Virgo, in your birth chart, or as a transit. And maybe more service-focused, or cold, or indifferent, or more interested in career. And Venus in Virgo people can be partners with mates who are bad for them, out of low self-esteem, can be the victim of love with broken romances. But as I said, Venus enters Libra, the sign he rules, on the 1st of December. So the next crucial issue is to know, what are the other planets doing to Venus at this difficult time? And here we look at Lilith, Pluto, Uranus, the nodes of the moon, Chiron, Sun, Saturn and Mars. So Venus is conjunct Lilith at this period. It's exact for the first time on the 27th of June and at the 8th of August and the 9th of October. Lilith is powerful material, so important to know, that is buried in your shadow, including your wild side. We must raise to the light what is our shadow. It's negative things which we need to know about and heal, but also it's our positive buried power, for example, which we weren't allowed to know about perhaps by our parents, priests or teachers, and we need to bring that from the shadow into the light. And yes, we must know about our wild side. We must express it ethically, otherwise we can't be the fullness of us. So all that is activated in this period, 27th June to 9th of October and a bit beyond that. And while that's going on, the couple need to be aware of how it will affect their love, their patterns of expressing love, their body issues. But negatively, there could be recklessness in romantic relationship, injustices and denials. Do recognise what your desires are. Do work on this issue. The Venus-Lilith combination is a potent power combination. And you could say it creates the journey of Ishtar or Nana into the underworld. See my journey to the abyss. Do get a combined astrology reading and journey to the abyss from me. There's a page about it on my Star Wheel Astrology website where you can book. The next thing to note is that Pluto is square the nodal axis all this time. Such big issues of power will arise, like a tide, for us to have the opportunity to take on board all through this time. And as we come more into our power, this will obviously affect our better handling of our Venus issues, ideally, unless we use power wrongly. Venus is square Uranus from the start of July, so that can bring revolution. It might well be needed. Awakening might tug at you. Be open to revolutions, bring in some new interests, bring in new values, break free of outmoded ways of relating by recasting your existing relationship patterns. Don't let the tensions get out of hand. Now, Ketu, the south node of the moon, is transiting the relationship sign of Libra. That's until the nodes change sign and Ketu enters Virgo on October the 30th. Ketu transiting Libra is a pressure and a divine call for each of us to connect better with our relationship issues. And past life matters relating to relationship and sexuality may very well arise for healing at this Ketu transit of Libra. Issues from earlier in your life and from your past life may arise for healing. So important to recognise all that. Next, Chiron is trine Venus. That's on the 3rd of July, and Chiron trines Lilith around the 5th, 10th August. Chiron trines Venus exact on the 15th of August. Now, Chiron is our wounded healer, and connect that sense of woundedness and the capacity to heal it with your Venus, with your Lilith. The next point I make, and it's covered also in the blog, Venus is transiting conjunct the Sun. And so from the August